Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of the outdoor world, welcome to the first official podcast of The Bleeding Edge. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time now, and I finally have access to a really good podcast studio, and I just want to use this kind of as a platform to just like talk to you guys, and because there's not a lot of time in the day to like make an actual video to show you guys some of this stuff, and a lot of you guys don't even have time to really watch any of this kind of stuff. So if we can use this kind of as a little small platform that you guys can just listen to when you're just kind of, I don't know, driving to work or, nonchalantly doing things throughout your day. That's kind of what I'm, looking to do with this kind of platform and this podcast. I'm going to try and make these episodes like somewhat shorter, 35, 40-ish minutes, if even I can get that long. I tend to talk kind of fast sometimes, and hey, everyone knows how that goes. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is officially January 19th. Pretty much throughout most of the U.S., hunting seasons are pretty much over. And I hope everyone had a really good season. I know mine was a little bit of ups and downs. I mean, we started off the year going to Idaho, actually, for the first couple weeks of September. This was my first ever elk hunt. And it was actually really fun. It was a really good experience. It was something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I didn't think that I was going to be able to do it. But because of Corona and everything else, with school being kind of, cut off around spring break time, I actually had an opportunity to work a lot more than I normally did, so I made a lot more money. So I was actually able to put some of that money towards our Idaho elk hunt, and that was a really, really, really fun experience, and I can't wait to do it again. Unfortunately, we didn't end up with any elk, but I guess I'm just going to kind of go through that story quick because, I'm just going to kind of talk about how my season went, and this is kind of how it started. So we left, I think it was like the 10th or the 11th of September, something like that. We didn't want to go right on opener because one of my friends, Austin Field, who I hope to have on the podcast eventually, he had been there the year before, and he said, the bulls didn't really start turning up until pretty much like the second to last day that they were there. So we were like, okay, well, why don't we just go, right when you were starting to see them or, hear the bulls, right when the bulls are starting to bugle, the rut was starting to get going, this, that, and the other thing. So, okay, that was our plan. So we left, a couple of days of driving. We got there in about, 18 hours. We drove straight there. There's three of us. It was me, my Cody, who you've also seen on the channel before, and then Austin, who you saw in the one video where we were goose hunting. Anyway, so three of us went, and we all took turns driving. We got there a little over 18 hours. It was just over the border into Idaho, about 35, 40 minutes. So that was a bit of a trek. It was the second longest trip I've ever taken, other than, driving to California for spring break. But so we got there, and it was obvious right away that we were going to have a lot of hunting pressure. So there was like 3 or 4 pickups already there. I think most of these guys were local because, they were kind of in and out, and you never really saw these people more than, once. But we got everything packed up. We started hiking in there a little bit, and, it was obvious that, it was going to be tough. And this was something that, in Minnesota, you don't see a lot of this terrain. You're not usually walking, up hills and, whatever. And it was actually it was unseasonably hot. I mean, I think it was just ridiculous because I think in about day 3 or 4 or whatever it was, it was 28 overnight, but then we got sunburnt that day because it was like 78 degrees. And that's, I guess it's kind of not really normal for Idaho. I don't know. I don't live there. But, so that was a bit of a challenge. So it got to we woke up the first morning and we walked about, a little over a mile and a half, and we bugled on the first ridge and instantly got an answer. So here I'm sitting in the back of my mind like, holy crap, here we go. Everything you watch on YouTube and TV about elk hunting, it's like, it's here, it's happening. So this bull was like way up on top of this mountain that was, facing to the north of us. And we quick got down from the ridge we were on and climbed up this mountain that this bull was on, trying to get ahead of him because the thermals were coming up, and that was probably like the worst terrain of like the entire trip. That was like the thickest, densest, fallen trees, weeds, you name it. We were walking through it. It was just ridiculous. By the time it was 7 o'clock, we were stripping off pretty much all of our clothes because it was just so hot already, and we had been working so hard to get up this mountain, and we never did get that bull to sound off again. And that pretty much led us into the afternoon. We stopped at the top of that mountain to eat a little bit after we had done some glassing and stuff like that. And then we started moving down to where a couple of the spots that Austin had marked on his GPS, and we were just randomly walking down this hill or this mountain. I should stop calling them hills. They're freaking massive. And then all of a sudden, a couple cows just stand right up. They were obviously bedded in there, and we were frozen, having a stare down with these elk at like 50 yards. But with the fallen trees and everything that was in our way, no one could get a shot. So we just stood there and basically had a stare down with them. And they eventually trotted off, and we tried to relocate them again. And this, the funniest thing about elk is, they're a 700-pound animal, and once they're gone, you will not find them. It's crazy how easy they can disappear. So yeah, that was a really fun experience to see right away on the first day. And then, that just got our hopes just skyrocketed, basically, because they're like, oh yeah, we heard a bull first day, never got on them, but it was fun to see. And then we got on some cows or whatever when we ran into them in the bed. But, that was really cool to see on the first day, just, something that you've never experienced before. And, it really got us going to, start off this hunt. Unfortunately for me, I don't know if it was because I didn't do enough in the off season or just my boots were bad, but the heels of my feet were absolutely just shredded, and it was really hard for me to walk. They were bleeding bad, and this was day one of the hunt. So I'm sitting there well, what the heck am I going to do now? So the next couple days, while I was trying to recover with that, I just sat on little water holes and little wallows, just to see if I could, try to hunt them without, trying to murder my feet, because one of Austin's good friends actually shot a bull off a wallow the year before, I think, or somebody shot a bull off a wallow the year before in the same area, and then they did it again this year. Both of the elk that group had took were off a wallow. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I can't really do much, and I don't want to slow the other two down. So I was just like, okay, I'll go hunt the wallows. Well, it was hot enough for them to want the wallows, but they never really. I never heard a bugle. I never saw anything, in the 3 or 4 days I hunted that way. Because, just my feet just progressively got worse from, hiking all the time. I eventually just taped them up, and then I was just hiking in my Crocs. I did that for 4 days. I think I hiked 30 or 40 miles in my Crocs. It was just ridiculous. Those things are absolute troopers. But, I would have felt a lot worse about, my feet being bad and having to sit on the wallows if the other two guys would have been turning up bulls. But I think from day 2 to day 10, I think we heard 3 bugles total. And I think 2 of them were at night when we were sleeping and just had to get up to go to the bathroom or whatever. So that was kind of disappointing. We just couldn't find the bulls. And when these elk don't sound off, that timber is so thick that, it makes it really hard to glass, and it makes them really hard to find. You basically just have to run into them. And at that point, you're either winded or you're spooking them out of a bed, and then your chances are kind of, shot in the rear end anyway. So we went into town. We actually stopped in a little bar in Wyoming that was connected to kind of a campsite where we were able to shower and get a good meal in that wasn't, freeze-dried mountain house and whatever. So that was actually really nice. It was a good way to kind of reset and just kind of keep going with, the hunt, not to get, too down on ourselves and whatever. So then we got back. We did that, what was it, twice? Yeah, I think in the 10 or 11 days we were there, we went back to that little place in Wyoming twice. It was a half-hour drive. We would hunt in the morning and then spend the rest of the afternoon doing that. But so we got back, and this is the morning of day 10. I think so, yeah. So morning of day 10. My feet are starting to feel pretty good again. So I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to hike with you guys tomorrow. So here we are. We're hiking along. We were looking at the forecast, and the forecast was looking warmer than even when we got there. I think it was low 80s. It was just ridiculous. So we were like, you know what? We can't turn up a bull. We can't find them. We're going to sit and freaking hunt them like deer. We were just going to sit on a wallow all day. We weren't going to make a sound, and we were just going to try to shoot a freaking elk out of the water hole. So that's what we were going to do. We were going to hike to this water hole right away in the morning, and we were just going to sit there all day like we're, sitting in a deer stand shooting whitetails. So that's what we did. We got about, 2.5 miles down this trail. There's tons of dirt bike trails on this little piece of public. And that was kind of another problem we ran into, was dirt bikers all the time and just tourists, whatever. But yeah, so we were hiking on this dirt bike trail, and all of a sudden I see, because I'm a little bit behind the guys because my feet are, slowing me down just a little bit. I'm maybe 50, 60 yards behind them. And all of a sudden I just see them, Cody and Austin both, to just stop dead in their tracks. I was like, oh, crap, okay. And then I look to my right, and here's like 8 or 9 cows with calves. And they just stand right up. And then I'm like, okay, this is good. So then all of a sudden I see Austin draw back. And I was like, oh, crap, he's going to actually shoot one of these. I mean, from where I was standing, the brush was just too thick on the side of this little trail that, I mean, I probably had a 50, 60-yard shot on the one cow, but I only thought there was like 2 or 3 at the time because I just couldn't see anything. And there was no way I was going to be able to shoot through the brush. So I was like, okay, well, I'll sit and watch and try and watch the hit. And Austin let one rip on this cow. I think his first shot was 57 yards. And Austin, he's shooting a really heavy arrow. It was like 670 grains. Shooting a big 200 grain single bevel. I mean, the thing's a beast. And it blew right through that cow. And I was watching her walk up this ridge, and she was bleeding. I mean, the hit was back. It was maybe center mass, but I mean, she was bleeding pretty good out of it. And so I was like, okay, I mean, it's a liver hit. And we backed out. We got the arrow, but then the fletchings were just like yellow. I'm like, oh, dude, that's not good. I mean, I've got shot enough deer, shooting slugs and whatever, that I just know that, I mean, they're going to lay down eventually, but I mean, they can go, and they're going to go to water, and they're just going to keep going until they can't. So I told them, like, on a whitetail, I'd be waiting a long time. I mean, I knew it was a liver hit too, because I could see her bleeding out of it, and there was blood on the arrow. So I knew he had to hit something. I was pretty sure it was a liver hit just because of how far back it was. So I told him at least 6 hours. I mean, 6 hours minimum. I think we waited 8. And then we went back to that same little site. I found one drop of blood within the first, I don't know, 100 yards maybe. And then we just kind of grid searched after that because we couldn't find any blood. And then, I think that night? Yeah, because we shot her right away in the morning. And then we went back that night. And then I think we found another where she had laid down with a bunch of blood in it. And that was pretty much the last that we ever saw that cow. So I'm pretty sure she didn't make it, just based on the hit. I mean, like I said, she was bleeding down the side of her as she was having a hard time walking up that mountain. So I'm pretty sure she didn't make it, but, she just wasn't bleeding enough that, we could find decent blood. I mean, when you shoot them back like that, they got all those little muscle fibers, on the inside of, or back of their ribs, where their skin attaches to, and that's really flexible. And you put a hole through that. There's a video on YouTube if you guys are ever watching The Ranch Fairy, and I'm going to talk about him a lot on this podcast, but he makes a video of like why blood trails aren't predictable. And it's because when you shoot them, that muscle or that tissue is so flexible that, you pierce through the skin, and then there's that secondary layer of, I don't want to call it meat, but it's like super thin, and then once that gets cut through, it's independent from the skin. So, if it's not running, or it's not, in a super, important area where it's going to be just gushing blood out of it because of air or blood pressure or what have you, I mean, they're just not going to bleed. I mean, pretty much the only way you're going to have blood is, I think the only blood we found is when it was like dripping down her side, and that's why I only found like 1 drop. But I mean, I think that was why, primarily we didn't find a lot of blood, is because the only other time that we found blood is when she laid down, and then, of course it's on her side, it makes perfect sense. But yeah, that was kind of the end of that. I mean, we slept on it. We weren't going to hunt the next day. We were like, okay, we already have 1 elk hit. We're having trouble finding bulls. It's not like we're on a 320 every day. So we were going to dedicate pretty much the rest of our time trying to find this cow. And then if we didn't, we were pretty much ready to go. I mean, we were beat up. I mean, my feet were awful. I mean, everyone was just ready to kind of go home. We were feeling really defeated. I mean, Austin especially. I mean, no one ever likes to do that to an animal. And I mean, especially your first elk that you've ever really drawn back on. So, I mean, he was obviously disappointed, but I mean, it was a good learning lesson. And, that's a tough shot to make. I mean, you're sitting on a trail that's not even ground. You're shooting uphill at 57 yards, and you're not prepared. It's not like a bull that's coming in. He's coming. You have a decent idea of where he's going to come from. You have time to kind of prepare yourself. I mean, he was just kind of like, oh crap, there's an elk there. Draw back, shoot it. And that can be a really tough thing to do. So yeah, that was day 11, and then we ended up just packing up and going. I think we were planning on staying like 12 or 13 days, but we called it a couple days early just because of that. So that brings us into the latter part of September. And, Austin, he doesn't really waterfowl hunt much anymore. Cody, he likes to, but he doesn't really find the time to, and he doesn't really have the spots available like I do. Excuse me. So we're into the latter part of September. I had missed the first 2 weekends of goose hunting in Minnesota because of our elk trip. So I was eager. I was ready to go. And everything that I had really looked at from the summer was pointing to a really, really good year of goose and duck hunting. I mean, our spring was really, really, I don't know, I don't want to say calm, but it was favorable for, the hatch. And every time you'd see geese, I mean, they'd have little goslings. I mean, they'd have like 15, 20 of them. And it was just ridiculous how many geese were around. But I was talking to my uncle, who I primarily do a lot of my hunting with, and he's like, dude, there's no geese around. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, there was like packs of 100 geese. I mean, family groups that were 30, 40 birds, large. It was just ridiculous why there was no geese around. They said in the first weekend, on the spot that we normally hunt at, I think there was like 5 people there. I think they killed 3 in the first 2 weekends. So I was feeling kind of down and out about that too. It's like, geez, I just come back from this elk hunt that we just got our rear ends kicked for, 12 days. And then I'm looking to come back and, sit in my little water hole and relax, shoot some geese, have some fun. And then it's just like, well, then there's no geese here. Okay, great. So, I mean, we scrapped out a couple limits. I mean, my uncle shot his first band since he was like, I don't know, a kid basically. So that was kind of fun to do. But yeah, we didn't really shoot the geese like we normally did. I mean, I don't know where they went. I don't know because it got cold. I mean, it did get a little cold in September, but I mean, if anything, that should be pushing the birds from north down south. Because I'm from south central Minnesota, so I mean, usually, the colder it gets, the more birds from the north push down. I mean, we usually get some good shoots in, later part of October yet. So yeah, we didn't shoot. I don't even think we shot 15, 20 geese. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous. I mean, I was out pretty much every weekend I could, but then I was also kind of dedicated in bow hunting a lot this year. Because I shot my first buck last year with my bow, and I've basically been addicted to it ever since. That's the reason you're hearing my voice right now. I mean, this is the bleeding edge. This is the new platform. This is like we're hunters, man. I mean, that's just what we breathe, what we eat, what we know. And I hope to have Austin on the podcast here too, because he's just as dedicated and about bow hunting as I am, and he knows probably just as much, as not more, than I do. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say about a couple things. But so yeah, I mean, we shot some geese, we shot a couple ducks. I mean, we don't shoot a lot of mallards and whatever. We're on the water hole that I normally hunt, just because for some reason the mallards just don't like it in there. So we shoot a lot of teal. We shoot some wood ducks. The one guy actually shot a banded teal, banded blue wing. So that was kind of cool to see. So then transitioning to, kind of the early part of October. I was pretty much done waterfowl hunting. I was like, you know what, this is ridiculous. I'm not shooting a lot, and I'm just not even seeing the birds. I mean, it was kind of disheartening after seeing the amount of birds that there were this summer compared to this fall. So I was transitioning into bow hunting, and I actually bow hunt on the same property that I goose and duck hunt. I mean, that place is just a freaking haven. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to do what I do. So I go into the stand I call the graveyard, and I've killed a deer in there almost every year since I was 10 years old. The freaking place just produces deer, man. I mean, the guy plants corn, it's CRP in the middle of it, and then there's a creek. I mean, this deer just don't have to leave. And they got thick willows and this big thick timber to bed in when they want to, when it's colder. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much potential they have for growing a deer in this area. The only problem is both of the neighbors hunt, and they got grandkids and everything else, so pretty much anything with horns on it gets shot. Because in my zone in Minnesota, there's no 4-point limit. There's no nothing when it comes to slug season. I mean, if it's got horns on it, it's getting shot. I mean, people like to eat. You know what I mean? So here we are in the first or second weekend of October, and I'm seeing deer everywhere, but nothing with horns on it. I mean, there was one day that me and the landowner's son were hunting, and we counted 14 does in a pack, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not unheard of. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys out there are like, oh, I've seen 25 deer in field at the same time. Yeah, you guys plant flute plots. That's great. But so yeah, we counted 14 does just consecutively, one after another after another. And I mean, you're talking to a guy who sees maybe like 25 deer in a season, on this property. I mean, there's deer everywhere, but, when you're hunting them, they're kind of few and far in between. And it was just weird that, like, no one had ever seen a buck yet. So, usually, the landowner, when he's, chopping corn or making hay or whatever, he's always seen a buck. Somebody's always seen a buck. And the thing that, we did wrong this year is we never set trail cameras. And we always used to do that in the past when I was younger, 10, 12, 14, whatever it was. We always set 3 or 4 trail cams out there just to see what was out there. We were never looking for a monster. I mean, we fed them a little bit because I used to live on a place that had an apple tree. So we would just take all the bad apples. We'd bring them out there, and then we just put a camera in front of it just to see what was out there, if there was a monster running around or whatever. But it was just weird that no one had ever seen a buck on this property this year. Usually there's little ones. I shot a little 8-point last year. I mean, it was just either a 1.5 or maybe a 2-year-old. I don't know. But it was the first buck with my bow, so I didn't really care. So kept hunting hard, and then it got to slug season, and I'm like, geez, do I buy a slug license or just keep bow hunting? Because, I mean, it's not like if I buy a slug license, I have to shoot a buck. But it was the week before slug season, and I was sitting in the stand, and then all of a sudden this doe just comes booking it out of nowhere. I mean, she's running. She's mouth open, like she just, I don't know, she saw a ghost or something. She just comes booking it. But all of a sudden she stops on the corner of the CRP in the cornfield and then just kind of mellows out and chills out over there. She's not looking behind her. She's not, not doing anything. So I was like, okay, well, nothing's really chasing her. She's not looking behind her. And then, this is a pretty good sized doe. And she starts walking basically right in front of the stand. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just candy. I mean, she's going to be 30 yards. She's going to be perfectly broadside. She has no idea. She just got done running. She's kind of like just trying to calm down. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to shoot her. I haven't seen a buck yet. My fall's been not doing so hot. We didn't shoot a lot of geese. I mean, my family, kind of relies on most of that meat from the geese and the ducks and all that other stuff to, make brats and what have you. And we didn't have a lot of that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to shoot her. She's pretty decent. There's a lot of does around. Not going to be a bad thing if we take one out. Okay, so this doe starts walking really, really slow in front of me. I mean, she probably took 8 to 10 minutes to walk like 40 yards. I mean, it was just ridiculous how slow it was. And she finally got in front of me. I drew back, and I got her stopped, let it go. Arrow hit right behind the shoulder. I'm like, all right, sounds good. Made a good shot. She runs off into the willows to the south of me, or the north of me, excuse me. And then I was like, okay, yep, looks good. And made a couple calls. I was like, okay, yep, shot one. And you want to come help me look for her or whatever. And I went down, looked at the arrow, and it was kind of the same Cinderella story that Austin had with his elk. It was like I looked at the arrow, and it was like half blood, but then it was also like half yellow. I was like, what the heck is going on, dude? I was like, I know I watched that arrow hit right behind the shoulder. And I was just baffled at like the amount, the lack of blood or, how yellow it was. And I was just looking at him like, dude, this ain't good. I was looking at my uncle. I was like, dude, I don't even want to go look for it right now. He's like, no, we're fine. Okay, so we brought a couple dogs in there because it's finally legal to do that in Minnesota. The landowner's son has a Springer and either a red lab or a yellow lab. I can't remember what she is, but they went in there and we got on blood. I mean, we had a little bit of snow at that time, and so you could see little blotches, but it wasn't a lot. I mean, she was not pouring out by any means. And it went into the thick willows and stuff where it was kind of hard to walk. And I mean, the dogs were in there like nothing. I mean, they're used to walking through the thick stuff. I mean, they're pheasant dogs, so I mean, they were used to it. And then all of a sudden, the dogs really wanted to go into the water really bad. But we were pretty sure that this deer had not made it to the creek. But I mean, it was getting to the point where we couldn't see anything anymore, and it was plenty cold already. So we were like, you know what, we're just gonna back out. We don't have a lot of blood to go from. We'll bring the dogs back in the morning. Okay. Well, we should have listened to the dogs because exactly, I don't know, 70, 80 yards from where we last found blood, I think she had jumped into the creek and swam down a little bit and then went up on the bank and laid down because that's where we found her. But she was 3/4 of the way eaten by coyotes. So, I mean, if there was anything even salvageable on that doe, I would have tagged it. But it's just what do you do? I mean, you just keep hunting. I mean, that's just what you do. We even asked one of the DNR guys, and he's like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. Just keep hunting. So that's what I did. And so that brought us to the first weekend of slug hunting. And I wasn't going to actually buy a slug license because, like I said, I have to shoot a buck. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that yet. If I was just going to keep bow hunting, shoot another doe or whatever, I just wanted to keep my options open. But then my uncle's finally like, you know what, if you don't really want to buy the license, I'll buy it for you. Because, we rely on that meat a lot. So I was like, okay, I'll slug hunt. So you come to the first weekend of slug hunting, and it is just ridiculously warm for Minnesota. I mean, it was almost 70 degrees. I mean, windy, just ridiculous weather for hunting a whitetail by, anyone's standards. I mean, it's November. It shouldn't get above 50 degrees during the day. And I think I saw 2 does, and that was about it. And there was still people killing a lot of deer in the area. So, I mean, I was pretty hopeful that, would have been a chance I would have been to see a buck because, it's full rut time now. And my hopes were still high on seeing a buck. So I wasn't really down and out just yet. So we come to the second weekend, and it had dumped about 6 to 8 inches of snow on that Wednesday before, or, the Wednesday during the season. And I was feeling pretty good about that. It's going to get the deer moving. It's going to get really cold. So what I did is, just because Corona's a thing and I was able to take my college classes online for the most part, or kind of by choice, I went home on that Wednesday, and then I was going to hunt Thursday, Friday, through. I was really going to put in some time behind the slug gun. And Thursday, I didn't see a single deer, but I did shoot a coyote, so that was good because there was a lot of coyotes in the area. All of a sudden, we fast forward to Friday. It's just ridiculously cold out. It's 6 degrees. I think it's the coldest I've ever hunted in. I was sitting there on my phone. It was probably 8 o'clock. Sitting there on Snapchat, and I literally put on my story. I was like, why the hell do I do this? And I put the little tag that said, 6 degrees on there. And I closed my phone. I put my phone down, and here's a doe staring at me 15 yards, like staring into my soul. And then I was like, oh, shit. And then I could hear the buck grunting to my left. And this is the first time I've ever heard a buck grunt in the wild. I've killed 9 bucks. The first time I've ever heard a buck grunt in my life. And he is just coming in. I mean, he's mouth open. He's foaming at the mouth. I mean, there's steam rolling out of this freaking deer's head. And he finally stops. And I had my gun pulled up already because I'm like, if that doe bolts, I don't really care because I'm going to be able to, that buck is going to be concerned about the doe running away. He's not going to care about what I'm doing in the tree. So I pulled up, and the doe didn't move. And he came out just guns a-blazing, and I had to pull my mask down and scream at him to get him to stop. Put the crosshairs, I shoot a 220 Savage 20 gauge with the Remington AccuTips 2 3/4, and put the crosshairs right behind the shoulder. Boom! Dropped him like a ton of bricks. I'm like, holy crap! Finally, after probably 100 hours of sitting between October and now, first buck I had ever seen with horns on it. Well, I shouldn't say that. I did see a buck the night before, but he was on the neighbor's property. I forgot to mention that. But this was not the same deer. I know it wasn't. So finally, it all came together. I finally saw a deer with horns on it. I made it happen, and he drops like a ton of bricks. I never had that happen before with a slug. Usually with these Remington AccuTips, usually they hit something hard, they expand. I rarely get a pass through with these slugs. I've gotten one other pass through. So he dropped like a ton of bricks, but he was still kind of flopping there. And after a couple minutes, he kind of just sat with his head up. And I'm like, I don't like that. I've heard way too many stories about deer with their head up. So I'm like, he's not going to suffer anymore. I racked another one in there. I put one right through his neck. Okay, saw the fur fly out the other side. I was like, yep, we're good. I made a couple phone calls. I was like, yep, we got work. My uncle's working at home right now, so he was able to, take the 5-minute drive out there with the pickup and then come get him. So he was like, okay, I'm on my way. So then I was climbing out of my stand, and this is a, kind of a rickety metal stand, it's permanent. We kind of leave it up there all year. And then, all of a sudden I hear a noise, and it's like, he stands right up. Like, you have got to be kidding me. I blew out your lungs. I put a bullet through your neck, made a phone call for 5 minutes, and then you're still able to stand right up. So he's just sitting there looking at me. So I climbed back up in the tree stand. I had one more shell in. I racked it in there, and I put one more right through the Boilermaker. And then this deer bolts right at me and headbutts the tree under me. I mean, he runs another 50, 60 yards and just straight up pile drives the tree that literally is right next to my stand. I mean, he's 5 feet from, the ladder that I climb up into my stand in. So I was like, okay, well, hopefully he's done now because my hands are cold and it's going to take me a while to reload this thing. And I gave him another minute or two just to kind of lay there, and then I finally climbed down, and he was dead as stone. It was the biggest buck I had ever killed, 120-inch 10-point, which, that doesn't sound big to a lot of people, but, when you come from an area where, these deer are really heavily hunted, and it doesn't matter if they're a fork, a spike, if it has horns, it's getting shot. People like to eat. I mean, we're Minnesotans. We shoot deer, and we apologize later. So, I mean, that's kind of been my story of deer hunting. It's just every time you have an opportunity, you take it. And this is just the first time that I've had an opportunity at, a deer that was probably 3.5. I'm not going to say he's 4, but his body was big. I mean, he weighed over 200. There's no way he didn't. And, that was the biggest deer that I had ever killed. So, I mean, that's basically how my season went. Austin, I know that he had a hard time. He doesn't have private land to hunt like I do. I'm kind of fortunate that way. So he was bopping around on a whole, oh my gosh, I don't know how many different pieces of public that he went on, but I think he was only able to draw on a deer like 3 or 4 times, and there was either brush in the way or they were moving too much or whatever. I don't know. I haven't actually seen him since Idaho, and I've been trying to get together with him because I'm trying to build new arrows for next season because I'm planning on getting a new bow. I'll talk about that more in the future, but he had a really tough time, and he ended the season, probably sitting double what I did because he hunted all the way through December. I mean, he hunted till almost the last day. I think the last time he hunted was 2 days before the season ended, right after Christmas there, because our season ends on January 1st. So yeah, he had a hard time. I think he only saw a buck once or twice, but yeah, he had a really tough go of it. And if anyone deserved to shoot a deer this year, it was him. Just because, he outworked, me and Cody in Idaho, and he definitely outworks me for sure when it comes to bow hunting. Because I mean, he's just got a thorn in his side to just shoot a deer on public, and that's not typically how I tend to roll. I like to sit in a stand that I know I'm going to see deer, and I don't have to really look for a deer. You can tell me I'm not a hunter for that, but I like managing. I like the idea of managing a property. I don't like the idea of going into a piece of public with a bunch of sign on it and then kind of guessing. But it's much more rewarding when you do end up taking an animal on public that way. It's a lot more rewarding, I think. So it might be something that I try to do in the future more. But every deer I've killed has been off this property, and if I have permission to keep hunting it, I don't see a good reason to leave. So yeah. What am I doing in the off season this year? That's something I've been kind of asking myself. Am I going to change anything? What am I going to do? And the answer is, I'm planning on getting a new bow this year. I've tried out a couple of them. Well, I shouldn't say that. Oh yeah, I have. The new Hoyt bows that came out. I shoot a Hoyt right now. I shoot a Hoyt Power Max. Those came out in like 2019 or 2018, something like that. And the only reason I bought it was because I actually owed Cody. Cody bought a video camera, and he's like, if I'm going to buy this camera, you're going to buy a bow because you need to get into bow hunting with us. I'm like, okay, fine. So I did it, and I shot a buck, my first year with it. You guys heard about that. And then I've pretty much been addicted to bow hunting ever since. And, that Power Max is kind of like a mid-level bow. And I was looking for something a little bit more higher quality, something that's going to last me 4 or 5 years before I have to do it again. And I've been hearing a really, really lot. Oh God, I can't even speak English. I've been hearing a lot of really good things about the new Hoyts. The 2021 Ventum 30 and 33, and then the new RX5 and the RX5 Ultra. I went to my local Shields, and then I actually shot the Ventum 33 and the RX5, which is like the 31-inch or the 30-inch axle to axle. And then the Ventum 33 is 33 inches axle to axle. And I thought, initially going into it, I'm like, yep, I'm going to like the 30. So I was like, I want to shoot one of the carbons and one of the aluminums because I figured they're pretty much the exact same bow. I just wanted to know how they feel. So I shot the Ventum 33 first. Felt phenomenal. I mean, the thing they've done with that, that new binary cam system and everything they've done with that is just fantastic compared to my Power Max. I mean, I feel like there's 90-pound bows that feel better than my Power Max do some days, just because, the back wall is just so freaking spongy on my Power Max. But I mean, I got used to it after a while. I loaded it up with a bunch of weight, so the hand shock's like barely there anymore. But so yeah, I ended up shooting the Ventum 33, absolutely loved it. Moved to the Carbon RX5, didn't like it as much. I mean, there's a lot of people that are saying this is the most dead in the hand setup that they've ever shot from Hoyt. And granted, this is the first carbon bow that I ever shot from Hoyt, but I was still seeing a lot of that bow trying to jump out of my hand. So I don't know what the other bows were like. Like I said, I've never shot them, so I'm not going to sit here and say that this was good or bad. But it's definitely something that I would still probably put some weight on to try to get rid of that. But the Ventum was definitely less than the carbon one. So there's still like one or two other bows that I'd like to shoot before I really kind of decide what I'm going to get, and that's the PSE Expedite. And I've been hearing a lot of good things on that. It's a really good speed bow. It's 18 feet a second faster than the Hoyt. And I mean, it's got a slightly shorter brace height, but from what I hear, that thing is smooth as freaking butter. And I've been looking at a bow that's a little bit faster because, like Austin, I want to shoot a heavy arrow next year. So that's kind of what I'm changing to, is that I'm moving up. I'm shooting like a 475 grain arrow this year. It did blow right through my doe, but I obviously shot her back. And that's why she didn't bleed a lot. And I think it was because that front leg was back a little bit farther. If I was able to, comfortably put it right on that shoulder blade where I needed to, knowing that heavy arrow and that single bevel is going to blow right through them, I think, it would have been a little bit better outcome. So that's definitely something I'm going to be doing this year. I'm going to be shooting Victory RIP TKOs, the Elites in 250 spine, and then I got some inserts from Ethics that are 120 grains, and I'll be shooting a 200 grain head. So hopefully I can get that to tune right and everything else. Otherwise, I will be bumping back down to like 125 grain head and shooting like 575, which is still plenty heavy. Not worried about that at all. And no matter what, either way, whichever bow I decide, it's going to be an 80 pound, just because, the cams are so smooth and so efficient, it doesn't even feel like you're pulling it. Like yesterday, I actually had the guy test to see if that bow was actually 70 pounds because it didn't feel even remotely like that. So other than that, I'm going to be running slightly longer stabilizers this year, I think. The Hoyt has the nice feature of like the sidebar mount, so that's going to be really easy for me to kind of balance the bow the way I want to. Because, when I whitetail hunt, I'm not really worried about weight. I mean, you pick up the bow, you pull it back, you shoot it. It's not like you're lugging it around, 50 miles in 5 days. So, I mean, if it was something that I was going to bring Western hunting, I think the new Hoyts have that new stabilizer mount that's like right above the bottom bottom limbs. And that lowers the center of gravity, brings the weight forward a little bit. So you can run a much shorter stabilizer to decrease that weight. So, I mean, if I was ever going to go west, then I would utilize that option a little bit more. But otherwise, I'm gonna be using the same sight that I've been using. I'm using the Spot Hog Fast Eddie XL in a 3-pin. Love that sight. And then when I turkey hunt, I usually switch it out to the dual pin option, just because I normally shoot 20 yards. Usually you shoot a lighter arrow, whatever. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I did switch to a thumb button release this year too. So I'm still I'm getting used to that a little bit more, but I'm excited to see where that goes. So hopefully I will have another podcast coming out either Thursday or Tuesday of next week, talking about like what I've decided on as far as, new bow for 2021. And then hopefully I can get my arrows built. Me and Austin can get those built, and then we can start shooting. And then I can give you a better review of whatever bow that I do end up with. And then 2, start talking about, the heavy arrow setups and why I run those. So anyway, I think that is going to do it for the first ever Bleeding Edge podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm sitting right at my time frame, which is good. And I hope I didn't ramble on too much. And I hope I didn't bore you guys to death. But that's pretty much how my 2020 season went. And like I said, I hope you guys had a really good season. I look forward to making these podcasts in the future. I hope to get Austin and or Cody on here to give you guys a little bit more conversational, so you're not just listening to me ramble on about random things. But yep, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on the next episode.